Hello and welcome to the Point to Rise show. This is your host, Suzanne Prochelle, former international ballerina that found her passion in mindset, business, and technology, and is today the founder of Rise Media. It is my purpose to use all the experiences of my past to create a better, financially sustainable future for the performing arts industry. And that starts with every single one of us. I believe that being you is your superpower. And I am here to guide you, empower you, inspire you, and give you all the resources you need to rise above what you think you're capable of. Every week, I'll bring you 3 shows featuring guests, collaboration, and mini episodes to ensure that you have the support in your journey as a performer. I want you to know that you are not alone. Stop chasing and start creating. Your success starts now, here with you. So let's go. And we are back. Welcome back to the Point to Rise podcast. Our guest today is Dr. Megan Wise. Oh, good Lord, guys, you will not regret listening to this. I met Dr. Megan actually last summer in New York City when she was attending one of our networking. Back then it was still the networking event. She actually attended our first one, and it just blew my mind what she has to offer and how much love and passion she has for the industry. Now, let me introduce her properly. Dr. Megan Wise is a licensed physical therapist and a graduate of New York University with a doctoral degree in physical therapy. She's also a certified strength and conditioning specialist, nationally certified Pilates teacher, and a certified life coach. Dr. Wise owns and operates Megan Wise PT PLLC, a private physical therapy clinic in New York City. She also co-owns Move Wise Health Studio, a health and wellness company focused on injury prevention, performance enhancement, and health and fitness coaching. For the past 6 years, she has specialized in performing arts physical therapy and has treated the Broadway cast and crew of over 30 Broadway and off-Broadway productions, including Hamilton, Mean Girls, Cats, and Wicked. She has also had the privilege of working with professional dancers from American Ballet Theater, New York City Ballet, Alvin Ailey, American Dance Theater, and many others. She provides physical therapy services to film and television productions across New York City. Dr. Megan Wise regularly hosts workshops and talks for students, schools, productions, and individual performers on topics such as injury prevention, dance fitness and wellness, and maintaining a high-level performance career, among others. As a dancer and performer for 20 plus years, she has struggled with multiple injuries and chronic pain, and uses this knowledge to educate performers, their teachers, parents, and directors and choreographers. She lives in New York City with her fiancé, Anthony, and their rescue dog, Gizmo. Well, what an introduction, right, guys? So without no further ado, here's our conversation. Megan, I'm so excited to have this conversation with you. Thank you so much for coming on the Point to Rise podcast. This has been overdue for a long time, and I'm glad I re-asked, and here we are.
Yes, I'm so excited. Thank you for letting me join. This is so exciting.
Oh, of course. It's my honor. Okay, we got that out of the way. Excellent. Okay, so I introduced you, and I want to start today off with who is Dr. Megan Wise, actually, besides all the titles and all the accomplishments and all the beautiful accolades that you have assembled around what you're doing and how you're helping other people. And what else is there? Who are you? What lights you up right now? Let's start there.
Okay. Yeah. So all of those things, but as a human being first, I was a dancer. I'm a former dancer, and definitely more of a creative, artistic person with a lot of analytical brain in there. I was always very curious and wanted to kind of know like the best way, the right way to do things. And the discipline that was required in dance is actually what I enjoyed most. And so when I could not dance anymore because I got injured when I was 16, it let me kind of open that same concept to other things and go, I can be curious in other ways and I can still use that in some other way. So yeah, the gist of me is that I'm definitely more of a questioner. I definitely am someone who really tries to look for any possible solution and wants to play with that. And, you know, I also like to have a good time. So I'm try to have a sense of humor and enjoy what I can when I can, and make as many good relationships and connections as I can too. I think there's no point in life if you can't do it with other people. So you might as well have lots of experiences with other people too.
I love that. We don't, not something that I grew up with, not something that was very fostered in the dance and ballet world.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just
Yeah.
out there.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
You brought up curiosity. So it's something that I'm giving myself permission to be now curious. And it was not something that was even established in my training or even in my generation so much, right? It was just one path, one way, one answer, black or white. And I think it is challenging, particularly for the arts industry altogether, if we're not staying curious. However, I see a big opportunity for all of us to get more curious with our own life, who we are, who we want to be. Do you want to talk a little bit about that, how you actually got to be? I mean, yes, you said you were naturally curious, but there is something that we perhaps inherited not to be that way because it wasn't really serving anything.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. No, I get that. I'm someone, I don't believe in talent. To me, everything is a skill. And so that means it can be learned and it can be unlearned. So that I know is usually very shocking to people. So I grew up in a household that fostered curiosity, which I think is helpful. So though I was doing classical ballet, which in essence does not allow for curiosity, I was still allowed to be in my own way. And I think because my brain likes to ask questions and likes to know all the little intricate details of things, I was allowed to be curious in a way that didn't screw up anyone else. You know, I wasn't asking the questions that seemed like that would be an inappropriate thing necessarily. I was allowed to play in that way. So a lot of it was it was fostered from my parents, especially. They're both engineers, so they're natural questioners themselves. So that was something that I kind of grew up with and then had to relearn how to be curious after not being a ballet dancer anymore and learning to go, okay, my curiosity can actually extend to something beyond the reasons for a movement or the technique, or it became this like, oh, I can ask questions in other ways. I can be curious here, and it's not necessarily wrong to ask a question. It's not necessarily wrong to think of it in a different way, because if I talk to someone over here, they have a totally different experience. So that's also accurate, right? So that could also be accurate, and that could also be accurate. I think it was more of especially the stopping dance and having to kind of take a different look at the world around me. It allowed me to go, oh, okay, there's actually even more variety if I allow myself to see it. I think it's very easy to retreat back into the thing that you know, which I think is what people don't want to do, because it's very scary to be curious. Because what if you offend someone? What if you ask the wrong question? What if you find an answer that you didn't really want to find? Those are hard things to deal with. And I think I was safe enough in my household to do that. And that made it a lot easier. But I could see where the idea of the unknown can be very, very scary and can feel like you're tugging at something that, you know, is maybe a part of you. The definition of being a ballet dancer and then not being one was a huge shift for me. So, and I'm sure that was similar for you too. The moment that you were no longer a dancer and you were something else, that's a huge shift. It's defining yourself in a different way. So I think a lot of people have a problem with that, because if you ask questions, maybe you actually want to be slightly different than who you thought you were. So I could see that being a skill people need to work towards.
Okay, so When we look at curiosity within dance or in the arts altogether, why do you think there is so much little room for that at this point, even though curiosity actually fosters creativity, right?
Mhm.
And we're not really calling for curiosity altogether. We're
Mhm.
just saying, hey, you just need to be that person on stage and just be happy or sad or in love or not. But we never go to, well, what if, how can I try different ways? Why do you think that is? Like, where is that gap, and why are we missing out so much?
I think it's a fear of I think it's a fear of the answer to that what if. I really do. And it's not necessarily a fear of failure or a fear of success. I feel like that sometimes gets oversaid. I think it's a I think we're sometimes afraid of what if there is a different answer? Because if I know there's a different answer, I probably have to heed it. Like that means I'm gonna have to change what I do. It's so much easier to just keep doing the same thing and to go, these are the rules, just don't mess with them. It seems to work, it's good enough, whatever. You don't fix it if it ain't broke. Yeah, and it's but then it ends up, really like bringing down how artistic something can be and how much bigger something can be. It changes that level. Yeah, I think for the most part, it's much easier for people to just stay the same because then you don't have to deal with whatever has to happen when you know there's a different solution or a different answer.
Call to action, get more curious, ask more what if.
Hmm.
Seriously. It's
Hmm.
actually proven that just that question alone opens up your creative center in your brain, your frontal cortex, and makes room for different answers to come in, or solutions, or perspectives even. So what if those two words are one of the most powerful two words you can use in your daily life.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, I tend to bring that question to my patients quite often, especially if they're dealing with a like, what am I supposed to do next thing? Maybe they have a couple options of like, so do I keep doing therapy? Do I have surgery? Do I have, they have these options and they're like, so what do I do? Someone just tell me the answer. I don't know. I tend to ask them what if questions of like, so what if everything works out? What would that look like? What if it doesn't work out? What's the worst that could happen? What's the best that could happen? That what if thought process, and I try to have them do it for each process and go, so what if you have surgery and it's the best thing for you? What would that look like? What if you have surgery and it's the worst thing? What would that look like reasonably? And
Right.
so trying to get them to work through that and go, okay, so here's actually my options and they're way better than I thought they would be. And I can handle every single consequence, no matter what that is. Yeah.
Best case, worst case scenario, right? Like what's
Hmm.
find my way
Hmm.
through that. Yeah. Okay. So let's talk about chronic injuries. And I really want to dive deep into this specifically for the generation that is right now in the studios and going through the everyday. You have survived COVID, the training at home, going back to the studios, going back to home. We're still doing that in some ways or others, and being even kinder in these kind of situations with your body, to everything that you are, is imperative. However, what I've seen is there's an all or nothing mentality, meaning I'm giving it all, and that means I'm going to hurt myself too, that my body will, I'm going to put my body on a second, third shelf as long as I can stay on stage. And we really want to dive into what that could actually look like in 5 years, 10 years, 20 years down the road. What does chronic injury really look like? So I'd love you to start us off with what are actually chronic injuries and how do they?
Okay. So the basic definition of a chronic injury is a repetitive injury. So it's something that happens over time as you continue a routine or continue a particular movement over and over and over again. Your body starts to develop ways to make it easier, which essentially means it kind of breaks down a little bit because you're never resting enough to kind of recover and then come back to it. And so that repetitive thing leads to this kind of slow moving injury that by the time you realize you have it, you've probably had it for months. The problem with most chronic injuries is you have a hard time like getting rid of them once you have them. So they end up being this thing that people kind of get used to having and then continuing to worsen or creating new injuries to get around it. But yeah, the basic definition is a chronic overuse injury.
Okay, so resting. I found that is a word that seems to be, it is in the English language, however, not many people understand what that actually means and why it is so important. Please take the stage.
Yeah, rest. It's almost like it's like a dirty word sometimes. It's one of those things that people will say it and they're like, you just need to rest. Like it's almost a judgment instead of it being like no, it's a fact of life. We all have to actually like slow down and sleep sometimes. It's normal. But yeah, rest doesn't necessarily mean stop everything. There's a difference between rest and stagnation. So rest is allowing yourself to recover. It doesn't have to be fancy. Rest can be as simple as, taking a day off from something. It can also be if you are taking dance classes, maybe you don't take the same technique class every day. You do something different on the next day. So it doesn't have to be total all or nothing, kind of leading back to what you were saying before. It's taking everything in stride. It's allowing yourself time to kind of learn and cope with whatever you're going through so that you have a better strategy the next time you do it.
And if I may, it also sets you up for a longer future.
Oh, yes.
It's not just a 5 or 10-year career.
Mm-hmm.
You may be able to be on stage for 20 or 25 years. And that definitely is worth the consideration of, okay, how am I feeling? What do I need today? But let's get back to the chronic injuries, because I think we underestimate, and when I say we, this is not something that is being taught when young women, men, or however you identify yourself, are being taught the art of dance, that what to watch out for and how to treat actually injuries and why it is actually important not to work through these injuries. At my time, it was a badge of honor. If you had a swollen foot, wow, you're so strong, you're so committed. I broke my foot before a class and my teacher told me, oh, doesn't look so bad. Why don't you give it a try? I mean, my foot was a double size and she felt terrible afterwards when I showed her the pictures of the broken toe. However, the mindset is still there that, oh, don't be such a wuss, you can work through it.
Yeah, it's such a problematic thing, and it's almost like a whole new martyrdom for dance thing that happens now, because I see it now in not just the ballet world, but also in that like competition dance where there's so much urgency to create something so that you can move up a level. Yeah, there's so much to look out for, and I think unfortunately it comes down to parents and teachers knowing what to look out for more than students, because I feel like unfortunately parents and teachers teach the students to ignore their pain or tune down their pain a little bit. So they may have a complaint, but if it's pushed under the rug enough times, they stop complaining. If they have a question, but it's pushed aside of like, we don't have time for that, then they stop asking questions. It becomes a like, well, I guess this is normal that my ankle feels this way because the only person I'm allowed to ask is the person next to me at the bar, and they have this too. So I guess that's not, like, I guess it's fine. I don't know. No one else seems to be complaining. Why would I complain? It becomes this process of like afraid to really say anything because you're not sure if it's valid. And unfortunately, that's becoming a whole new thing of you're seeing more and more teachers, unfortunately, go, oh, I have all these students going, that they're faking their injuries, which I hate that conversation, because if you want to stop a student from sitting out of something that they don't want to participate in, then you take every injury seriously.
Yeah,
if
exactly.
that's how you stop that. If you think they're making it up, Then you go, well, here's the thing. You're not allowed to take any classes. You're not allowed to come back in at all until you get a doctor's note saying you're okay. If they're making it up, they'll stop making it up. Like that's, but like 99% of them are not making it up. There's something going on. And you have to validate that for them because they're a kid. I mean, most of these things, most of these chronic injuries that we got when we were kids. We weren't adults. We didn't know any better. We were children. We don't know. So it's up to the adults in the room to know more than the kids in the room because they don't know any better. They're just going to do what they want to do. And if it's good for them to be doing whatever it takes because the teacher, the choreographer, the parent is happy with it, they learn to ignore the feelings that they're getting. And then it becomes this badge of honor because they're stronger than other people because they can ignore their own body and their own thoughts. It's such a dangerous concept because then you don't know what your body is anymore. It's just a shell. So it's such a challenging thing that chronic injury isn't just this physical thing, it becomes a mental thing as well. It becomes this thing that you're not really connected to your body anymore in the same way. And that's hugely problematic. And it sometimes doesn't take 5 or 10 years to catch up to you. Sometimes it only takes a year or two, unfortunately.
And so many good points. Let's go to when our mind and body isn't connected. Actually, let me reframe. When I had my body and mind actually so disconnected, yet still in tune with each other, that when I really didn't want to do something, my chronic injuries flared up. Like my nerves in my feet would hurt so much that I could not get into point shoes. Yet when we were taking any kind of MRIs or nothing would show. And that was my point where I knew, like, oh, wow, okay, so this is all up in my head. This is my soul speaking to me that I have now gone past my capabilities, what I can take in terms of pain and suffering, and not listening to myself, that we're taking over here. We're keeping you safe to a certain point, right? Let's talk about that a little bit, but particularly when it comes to children or young adults, that the pain they're feeling might not be coming from a physical injury per se, but from something that they're experiencing in their soul and in their mental health, and it shows and comes out in their bodies, right? So yeah, let's talk about that.
Yeah, this is such a challenging concept because this is the concept of pain, and the science behind pain is still developing. And it's so hard to explain without people sometimes getting triggered by it a little bit, because it's so hard to hear something like the pain that you're experiencing is coming from your brain. Because so many people go, oh, cool. So you don't believe me. It's in my head. I'm crazy. Like, no. It's in your brain. Your brain is what's creating everything for you. And your brain, its first job is to protect you. That's it. That's its first, like, that's the core thing. Its job is to protect you no matter what. It doesn't mean anything more than that. All of the emotions and feelings and stuff is a higher level thing. Your brain automatically is going to protect you when it needs to. So when you are consistently doing damage to yourself, whether that is physical or mental, your brain chalks that up to going, ooh, we're at risk. Oh, we're at risk. Oh, we're at risk. When it hits a certain threshold of risk, it shuts things down. It does that by saying, here's pain to make you stop. Here's swelling to make you stop. Here, it stops things from happening so that you don't continue to hurt yourself. Unfortunately, some of us have learned how to program ourselves to move beyond that. And we just ignore that part of the brain. So the brain has to shut down stuff hard. It creates these symptoms in your body to go, really, if you're not going to listen to me, then I'm just going to take over. Too bad, so sad. We're just shutting that down. That's what happened with my foot. My foot injury was that thing of, there was something that happened that was physical initially, but there were a lot of other things that happened and it never was addressed properly. And it ended up being something that they couldn't see on an MRI, they couldn't see on an X-ray, we couldn't figure out what it was. It wasn't until years later going into PT school that I went, oh, I I had a pain syndrome. Okay, my brain was literally like, if she's not going to pay attention to me, then I'm going to create a problem. Then she'll have to pay attention. Then she'll have to stop. She'll have to do the right thing and let me rest. Yeah, I mean that is a huge thing that happens, and it doesn't have to be physical damage to create pain. It can be mental, it can be social, emotional, and it can create physical symptoms. Just because you don't have damage doesn't mean you're faking it or making it up, but your brain is responding to something because it thinks you're in danger. And sometimes the way that it responds is by creating new symptoms, which is frustrating for most people.
Yeah, and it's just, I understand it can be frustrating. However, we expect, and I'm including my younger self, we expect our body to function, yet we're not paying any attention to the body in terms of, hey, how can we help you so you function the way I need you to function, or the way I would love you to perform with you together? How can we work together? There seems to be this thought taught that we're separated from each other and we have to fight against our body because our body is really lazy.
Mm-hmm.
And with that kind of perspective, yeah, of course, you're going to start hurting yourself and you're going to start working through because you're not trusting. So then how are you going to stay on stage and actually trust your body because you have not established that relationship yet?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is something that should be taught at the age of 4 years old.
Oh, yeah.
Or earlier. Whenever in North America, little children go into the studio and start learning how to be a dancer, that's when you start the education.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's exactly. I mean, that lack of trust in your body, that is something that very few people say those actual words, but I find that every single patient that I'm working with, my goal is to get them to trust their body. It's the whole thing is like, can I get you to trust it to do just this thing? Can I get that relationship to be a little bit better so that you can feel good in your body and understand you're not fighting it all the time? If you just listen to it, it'll let you do what you want to do. It might not look exactly the way you want it to at first, and it's not going to look like somebody else because you don't have somebody else's body, but it's going to be the way you should be doing it, and it'll be great that way.
That listen to that again. That's so important too. And it's not, so here, this is not something that has to do with weakness. And I find in these conversations that I'm having, I get asked not often, but sometimes. So do you think that when we are like paying more attention to how we're actually feeling and how our mind is working and how we're all establishing and we're giving into everything our body's telling us, that we're going to develop weak dancers? And I'm like, I don't quite understand where we're going here, but I don't think so. I truly think, know that the more attention we're actually putting into the wholeness of a dancer, meaning that they're a human being first, and that every single cell in their body is there to support versus work against what they want, I think then we're actually creating much better people, dancers, artists, performers that have so much more capability and capacity to give than what we're seeing right now on the stages and in companies and in schools and in competition.
Yes, I mean, I agree wholeheartedly. The idea of you're being weak by giving in to these things, giving in to what? By allowing your body to do what it does best? How is that giving in? Isn't that the whole point? If we let our bodies do what seems easiest, and then we build off of that, it tends to work out. I mean, no one's teaching babies how to roll over. No one's teaching babies how to crawl. They start to naturally do that. We continue to do that throughout our lives. It's these things they're not magical things. And it's not like you're having to constantly fight yourself to get somewhere. If you allow yourself to do what it does best, whatever the easiest route is, it's probably going to work for you. You then just build off of that. It doesn't have to be hard, and we make it so hard by having these strict, stringent rules and patterns that everyone must follow and ways that you must look, and it doesn't serve anybody. You can't do one size fits all because it doesn't fit anybody. It just doesn't work.
And with this you must be this way, there's then right on the other side, the not enoughness. And we're seeing that so much in the industry. How many people, and please tell me if you know somebody that doesn't think of themselves, they're not enough. Because it has been working on it right now.
Yeah.
You know, but isn't that we're not leaving enough room for individuality and vulnerability and authenticity and transparency for that matter. And we're putting all of these boxes there and say, okay, if you don't fit in there or in this one, see ya.
Mm-hmm. There's just no room for you. I guess you can go do something over there. Maybe if you make your own style, which, I've always hated that judgment of, oh, well, you just don't fit here. So, I mean, if it's important to you, you can just make it up over there. Like, what does that mean? Like, I mean, I had a dance teacher once tell me something along the lines of like, oh, so you're here because you just want to be a teacher. And I was like, what does that mean? I'm paying tuition to dance in like a professional level place because I actually want to be good at this. And you're sitting here going, well, I don't know why, because I didn't have perfect turnout and because I didn't have the body type you wanted. So I must be here because I just want to be a teacher. What does that mean? Does that mean being a teacher's bad? Like that, the stuff that you're saying, like, do you really? You're a teacher, right? So like what?
Yeah, what are you saying? You're not enough either? But like what we're talking
Right.
about. On that topic, I find it intriguing because I witnessed and I grew up in a Russian school setting. Like we all had to be long-legged, long-armed, and perhaps no upper body if possible, wonker feet, legs behind the ears. And the ones that had these possibilities weren't the ones that were the shining stars. It were the ones that didn't, that had to find different ways, that had to use their capacity between their ears more than anybody else and find solutions and not rest on what their body's ability natural gave them. And I found it so intriguing because I loved watching them so much more. I found them so much more interesting and intriguing. And you could see that there was so much more, I wouldn't say passion, but intelligence and love, like true love and authenticity behind it. And that's what I'm looking for. That what fills my cup when I go and watch people that are themselves, that have the courage to be themselves. The ones that are willing to say, no, I will not go on stage today because if I can't be at least at an 80% because of something hurting, I am not going on.
Yeah. It sounds so challenging at first because there's such a scarcity and an urgency all the time.
Yeah.
But and this is something I try to tell people when they're afraid to call out of a show. I tend to tell them, if you call out tonight, you might be able to do the rest of the week. But if you don't call out tonight and it gets worse, you might be out for a few weeks. What's one night now versus several weeks? Like that's an easy answer there. It's fine. You can take that day. You can take the moment. Something else will come. You will be fine. And there's this urgency to be like, but I have to do this or and it's like, or what? What really is going to happen? Someone else does that dance. Yeah. Like what's actually going to happen? Someone else will do that. Okay. And you won't be in pain. That's a good thing. Your health might be better off. You can then go and dance again the next day. That it doesn't have to be like a death sentence to take care of yourself. That's not how that works. If you take the time, you can create this wonderful, successful career on your terms instead of allowing injury to determine when you stop. And and you will do better for it. You will find the pockets where you are more successful, and you will find what gives it meaning, which is kind of what when I see those dancers that you were talking about, that they didn't have the perfect facility, they had everything else. It brought meaning to what they were doing, and you could see it, you could feel it. That is going to take you so much further than having the perfect technique and just checking the boxes. It really will. I mean, it's nice, I guess, but if people are constantly looking to someone else because it just means something, it brings something refreshing to it, then that's not going to work.
Why do you think people are scared, artists are scared taking care of themselves first? Like, why are we incapable in our careers to put ourselves first, like our own needs, our health, our availability? Why is that?
I think it's instilled in us. I think that we are taught from a very young age, you do art because you must do it. You do it because it's, instead of it being a privilege to do it or even a responsibility to do it, it's this, well, the ones who really want to do it, it's because they would die if they didn't. And it's this concept of it has to be all or nothing, or it's not worth it at all. There's this feeling in there of, you get that urgency from a young age of like, if you're not all in, then what are you even doing here? Well, you can still be all in, and it's not going to look the same day to day. You can still have a life. You can still take care of yourself. I think there's also, I think a lot of that has to do as well with, we're not seeing it in other dancers. So because there's no one to really emulate that, it is more challenging for young dancers to look at it and go, oh, see, there is a successful person who's doing that. They're only seeing the ones that are putting it all out on the floor, and they're not seeing what the recovery actually looks like. Or when they do see it, it's being sugar-coated a bit. You're seeing dancers who are, they're professional dancers, and they're talking about the recovery, and they're showing snippets of how amazing something is instead of showing all of the stuff that led them there. And so it looks different, and it looks like, oh, well, the reason they're doing so much better and the reason they can dance is because they're just more gifted. It's because they had all this, and it's going to be different for me. I'm going to have to go through it. And so we're not seeing it in real life, which is really harmful, I think, even though we now can see more with social media and with the internet and having all of this availability. We're not seeing the real work that it takes to actually listen to yourself and be a human first. We're seeing more of the product instead of the actual way to get to that product.
But I think that's what people really want to see. We're craving that. Okay, let's redefine all in, because I think that is society-wise all over the place. If you're not all in, you're all out. All in does not mean harming yourself for what you want to do. You can, when we're talking about you need to make sacrifices for whatever you want to do, let's say, are we taking the example of Van Gogh and other people that have harmed themselves physically as an example, because we have yet to really dive into why they actually did that. It had nothing to do because they didn't get out. It was they're just mentally ill. That was the reason. We don't have to be mentally ill in order to be successful as an artist. So let's take that equation out of me. When we're looking at people that are successful and all in, and let's say we're even managing to say, well, they made some sacrifices, whatever that means for you. I'm not going to go into what sacrifice means or what that could be seen as, but All in also means taking care of you, because if you are not 1000%, not 1000, when you're not 100% looked after and loved by yourself, then you're not all in.
Yeah,
And
that's exactly it. Yeah. That's so it. You cannot be all in if you are not 100% allowed to be yourself. What are you putting all in if you're not you yet? Like it's so challenging to understand that, when I think all in, we see the result as all in. I think that's what we kind of compare, is that, oh, well, they look like they're doing this, or this is what's happening, so they must be all in. That person over there who's not as successful according to whatever that standard is, they must not be. So that's the difference. When it's, that's not what it looks like. I can be all in on this interview, and I can still be all in on making dinner in a few minutes. You know, it doesn't have to be one or the other. It's contextual. It's about give and take. It's about, so what do I need, and what am I allowing to actually give to this that still feels honest and true, and what am I not? And that's okay. You don't have to give 100%. You don't have to do blood, sweat, and tears on the floor every single day, because then you're not going to have anything left. You've got to be able to give what you're allowing to give, but it has to come from a good, secure, safe, and loving place, for sure.
Safe, secure, and loving. And I think that is exactly the miss. And we're seeing this over and over again, even in this incoming generation, because we're putting teachers into places of power that have not done the work, that just perpetually teaching the way they've been taught. And I think that is, we cannot go on like that. And it's everyone's responsibility to the internet. Google is your very best friend. You do not have to necessarily go to school for that to have a very basic understanding of psychology, physiology, mindset, how our body is actually working. There are so many examples out there. Try to jack it on. Whatever doesn't feel right for you is not for you. Take it off, but do the work. Stop listening to everybody around you and putting your feeling and your emotions into the trash bin and think they're not valuable. And start understanding that everything about you is worthy. And you got to stop suffering for what you want to do. And that comes with chronic injuries. Like, nobody should have chronic injuries.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they don't have to be. They don't have to be a thing. Yeah, for sure. I mean, I do try to tell people, like, because you are moving, because you're alive, you're going to have pain, you're going to have injuries, but you have control over how severe and how debilitating and how defining they are. You know, every trauma is going to happen. Random stuff happens, unfortunately. But the stuff like overuse injuries, which happen all the time, that's something that can be prevented, or it can at least be reduced. It doesn't have to be that bad. You know, that's one of the reasons why I became a PT, is because when I went to my physical therapist with my injury, it made me so angry that the concepts he was teaching me were already known. I remember him telling me stuff, and I was like, so this isn't like, this wasn't a freak accident. You're telling me that you can back up based off of what I've told you and what my injury is today. And you can go, oh yeah, we've done research on this and this and this, and we know this and we know. So we know this, but it's not being taught in a dance studio. So you're telling me that everything I've done to myself could have been different. All right. That's really upsetting that I didn't know that until it was well after getting hurt. And to me, it was like, that's so unfair. That everybody I know that's had these injuries for months, years, maybe they stopped dancing even earlier than I did because they were like, it's killing me. You mean we didn't have to do that? It didn't have to be that bad? Ugh, that's not fair. Unfortunately, I see a lot of adults who are not dancers anymore, and they have that same thing of, they come to me and they're in their 30s going, oh yeah, I have bad hips because I used to do ballet. And they say it in this like offhanded way. And it's like, it doesn't have to be that way. It doesn't have to be that way. Let's see if we can learn a different way to, one, talk about our body, because you don't have bad anything. You have just abused yourself in a way. And so we need to change that relationship. And two, we can change the way it looks moving forward. It's not set in stone. We still have options. So it's such a challenging thing to go, we actually have the knowledge, it's available, but you do have to search for it, and you do have to find trustworthy sources as well. Unfortunately, I've seen quite a few people who call themselves experts online that are saying things that are not correct and not based in any kind of science, and are hurting people for it and making plenty of money while doing so. And that's not okay. So you do have to kind of look through the internet and make sure you're getting good resources. But yeah, this knowledge is available. It's at your fingertips. There shouldn't be an excuse, especially when it comes to chronic injury, because you can do something today that'll change what happens to you tomorrow and moving forward.
It's just as easy as that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I want to put in here, like, please don't. I see so many dancers and artists and actors putting advice onto their pages, and my toenails are crinkling because they're giving advice on what they've been taught and how they've been taught, and don't eat after 5 and do all of these things and stretch like 1,000,000 hours a day if you want to have this. It's like, no, absolutely not. We can't, like, this is so irresponsible to allow this to be out there. Even platforms like Masterclass, when I look at them and what they're offering, I'm like, please stop, because you're not doing the industry a service. People are paying $100 for this. What? To not learn, well, to learn how to hurt yourself some more?
Right. It's, it's irresponsible, right? And it's hard, because I feel like the ones that are getting the most, they have the most following, so they seem like they're experts because, well, clearly they're doing something right because they're where they're at. You don't know. There are quite a few performers that I'm like, I see what you're putting up there. Please stop. Because I've treated you. That's not true. Maybe if you stopped doing that stuff, I wouldn't have to keep treating you. It's so hard.
And I think it is important to know that because you're an expert in one field does not make you an expert in another without some really good learning and deep diving and analyzing and sharing that story first. If people just tell you what to do without actually giving you a backstory on how they got there, I'm not talking about going to Harvard or any other schooling for that, because let's be honest, that whole schooling education system is so broken. You find more education from other people or on the internet nowadays than you will for your $100,000 in your marketing degree tomorrow. And look at the stories that they're telling. Don't think because they have achieved, I don't know, awards and fame and are, the principal of a company, or they're on stage every night, that automatically means that they know exactly how to treat their body or how to prevent injuries. Or go to the experts. These are people like you that have gone through a wide array of studies. When it comes to the body, you gotta study. You just gotta know the science behind it. And then ask those for help.
And I think it's important to me, like you were saying, it's not that principal dancer or that person who's on stage every night isn't an expert in not being injured, but they're an expert in themselves only. They didn't necessarily learn how to teach that to anybody else. And so you do have to find people who know how to teach others, which is a different skill set altogether. I might teach the same exercise to 20 different people, but it's for a different reason, and it's with a different cue, and it doesn't mean that that exercise is something that I will put on Instagram and be like, everybody should do this. Like, that's not what that means. It's done with some form of intelligence, with some form of reflection. And just because someone's really good at something themselves doesn't mean they're able to reflect and make it available to someone else. So it's good to ask questions of experts and see, sometimes that is a valid point. I've seen stuff that people have sent me and they're like, what do you think about this? And I go, oh yeah, that makes sense to me. Go ahead, try it, see how it feels. But you have to get that background of the relationship there. If someone asks me a question and it's out of my scope, I will tell them that. I'll be like, you know what? I can give you some opinions, but I'm going to point you in this direction. If someone always has an answer for every question you have, they're probably making some stuff up. It's just not possible to know everything about everything.
And with that said, where can we find you, Megan? What's coming down the pipe? What are you offering? Who are you working with? How can people reach you? When should they be working with you?
So right now I'm actually doing my final group of 10 to Places, which is it's a full comprehensive program for mostly musical theater performers, but I've also had quite a few commercial dance and ballet dance performers as well do this. It's 10 weeks of training that's sent directly to you. You are given plenty of information with it as well. So this involves like goal planning, a little bit about nutrition, a little bit about sleep, a little bit about like injury prevention, how to make your own goals and how to make it fit your dance style and your performance season. And so it's all available on my website, which is the easiest way to get it, which is thebroadwaypt.com. It's called 10 Weeks to Places. I also have a few other things in there, but that's the one that I'm finishing up on March 1st. So that's going to be the final group until I make something new for it, because that is meant for people who are maybe coming out of that pandemic mentality and not quite sure how to start over. I'm not quite sure how to get themselves into the routine of working out and training. So this will be the final group of that. But yeah, the easiest way to see me is on thebroadwaypt.com. You can set up any kind of appointment you want, whether it's PT that's virtual or in person. And then Instagram is also a great way to chat with me. If you have little questions or if you want advice on things, we can move from there. And that's at the Broadway PT. But yeah, those are the big things right now.
Yeah, check out her reels. They're really good. There we are.
I try to make them relatable, it's like I've actually been through this stuff, it's not, I'm not just pulling this out of nowhere.
Oh, you better not. Okay, last question. Let's assume your 16-year-old self would sit down with you and have a coaching session with you,
okay,
or just listen to you. What would you tell her from where you are at today? So you could maybe help her through some things a little quicker, or, speed up some.
Everything takes time. That's really what it would be. It would be like, just everything takes time, but it'll all do what it needs to in the time that it needs to happen. So breathe, let it happen.
Oh, breathe, let it happen. Oh, yeah. Hey, thank you so much for being here, darling. I really appreciated that conversation. We could go on and on and on about, digging up problems. I think the most important thing is that we now, over these 2 years, have unearthed quite a bit of problems, and it's time now to together dive into the solution. And it really truly starts with every person. It starts with you understanding that you are the most important thing on this planet. It starts with you asking for help. It starts with you taking care of yourself a little bit more. It starts with you feeling worthy of success, money, love, whatever you want. And I think that's how we can really make an impact for this generation and generations to come. So whatever really resonated with you, it would mean the world to us if you just share that on Instagram, Twitter, wherever you are, and tag Miss Megan, Dr. Megan Wise, at the Broadway PT
Yes.
or the Pointerized podcast, and we'll reshare for sure. Don't hesitate to ask us any questions. And if something like really rubbed you the wrong way, tell us too. We want to know. Absolutely.
Yes.
Well, right?
Yes, of course.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Well, we're sending you guys so much love. Thank you for tuning in today. Till next time. Thank you so much for listening. If this message resonates with you, please pass it on to someone who needs to hear this right now. And if you like what you've heard, your feedback will go a very long way. If you just take 30 seconds and leave me a 5-star review, that would mean the world to me. Till next time, point at yourself to rise to all that you are capable of.